All right, so that's a very quick way of defining that. Same thing with the face. I'm just going to do like, let's say, clothing and the face of the character. So I can do something like this. Done. These are like the nostrils and the lacrimals that I was talking about, kind of like that. The mouth of the character will go like this, kind of, right? But I also want to define a little bit more of this region. So I'm just going to do this, add a bit of a, more like a soft eyelid, or like the muscles or tendons around this orbital area of the eye. And then if I want to create much more intentional eyelids, for example, we can switch to the really strong standard brush, or in my case, I'm going to use the H.R. Geiger. And I'm just going to go into solo mode for a second. I'm going to push this like that. And you see, we now have like these really strong eyelids. Again, it looks really blobby. It's not great in terms of sculpting, but we're not creating a polished sculpt just yet. So I'm going to use the move brush. So again, I keep saying it. Hopefully it's going to pay off, but yeah, trust the process. So I'll just use my move brush to adjust this. Again, thinking about the proportions of this. And don't be afraid of, like, if something doesn't work, just smooth that out and adjust it later. It's all about iteration. That's the whole point of this workshop and this technique.
Hey Pablo, you're muted again.
Hello, hello, hello.
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay. So sorry about that. So I'm going to use these H.R. Geiger cutter to essentially define some of the assets. So for example, here, I want this to be the edge of the jacket. So I do something like this. Then this would be the shoulder pads. Do something like that. Maybe this one as well. Like so. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I want to have like some kind of like straps going on through here or something in the middle. But I'll define this first, right? So this looks awful in the sense that it doesn't define anything. It's not like telling you what sort of materials are, but this is just to give some volume to the edge. And then you go to the clay brush, again, with Sculptris Pro, and then you kind of like fill in the transition between that edge that you define and the rest of the volume. And that makes it really, really easy to define this type of thing. So for example, here, I'll just go like this. This is the clay brush. So you see now it feels like a bit more natural, that this is kind of like a volume on top. And I'll do the same thing here. And then the same thing here. And of course, you can smooth that transition a little bit, but that gives you that illusion that you have multiple volumes or layers around the character. So I love doing this. It's really easy to define this stuff. So now you see it kind of like feels more like it's a volume on top. So there's no need to do any additional additional subtools. I'm going to use this again. And I'm going to define this a little bit better. So I want to actually create this sort of padding that could be like a plastic thing, but then I'm going to refine this almost like as a hard surface. Right. So again, because we have those edges, we can bring in the clay brush. This also works with the clay builder brush. It's just that the clay brush, it gives you already something cleaner. So when you don't have to smooth things as much, and you don't lose that definition that you just created with the edge. But if you want the clay builder, you can also work with that. All right. So you see, it's not perfect at all. It's all blobby, but this is the point, that you're just creating things to test out and to iterate whether or not this works. And of course, there's processes that I'll show you quickly how you can turn this into something a bit more polished. But the point here is not to worry about, oh, how am I going to separate this from the head if you have it in the single subtool? Don't worry. This subtool that I have here is not even going to be the mesh that we're going to use to refine. This is only to serve us as a sketching tool and to be able to iterate faster. Because this thing that I'm doing, those I'm going to show you actually. These are 3 concepts that I did in about 15 minutes. Right? They're horrible in terms of like there's no topology that is good or anything. You can still see some of the brush strokes here on the things, but you know, it took me 15 minutes to do all these variations really quickly because I already am comfortable with the workflow. I'm not saying that after this workshop you go ahead and you do 15 minutes and you get something like this. It might take you, I don't know, maybe half an hour or a little bit longer. But if you continue doing this process multiple times, you will eventually get to a process that you feel really comfortable with these tools and generate these ideas very quickly. So this is my goal, to give you the tools so that you can go ahead and explore them. So what was I gonna do? Now I forgot. Let me just refine the ears a little bit. And I can also press the Alt key to push this. So, and let's bring in the clay brush. All right. So that's looking pretty cool. You could also use something else. This is just, again, a custom brush. You don't have to use this, but it just helps in this process. So it is the compression folds, and it's from a pack called the Cloth and Drapery. And you'll see all of these brushes that I sometimes use and that I currently use right now. It's because it's to speed up my workflow, so I don't have to create custom stuff when I'm working, and it just allows me to do this like a lot faster. So I can just go ahead and mask. Let's use the mask lasso like that. And again, I'm not too worried about like what I'm masking or not, just as long as it makes sense. And I can do this sort of like false. And that already suggests to me that this is a piece of clothing, right? It's as simple as that. I can go back to the damp standard brush, for instance. And just because it is easy, I'm going to hide this bit so I can see a little bit better. And then in here, I can just do some like folds, like for the neck, like wrinkles. And again, this is not necessarily details or anything like that. These are not very well thought, folds or wrinkles. It's just so that I can generate a little bit of a distinction between what's an organic piece and what's not, or what's like tech and all of that. So I'm starting to, I wouldn't say refine things, but I'm kind of like more consciously define what would be like an organic shape and what would be something else. All right. In terms of these hard surface stuff, you can use something like the H polish, this one right here. So if you filter by the letter P, then by the letter H is this one. PHP is the H polish. And I'll use that without the Sculptris Pro so that it's a little bit faster. And I just need to go through this and essentially flatten it. That's it. And then I'll do the same thing here. It doesn't have to be perfect. Believe me, this is not going to be the final thing. It's just so that you can define what would be more like a hard surface bead and what is not. And being able to judge this and go like, okay, this is just a square. Like there's no design, but let's go ahead and explore this design because that's what we're doing a little bit more. So I'm going to use the Slovensiski one. I want to press the Alt key. Right, and this is like, these are going to be the visor maybe. And then I'm going to use the slash one just to create some kind of indication of some paneling that I could use. Again, this is super rough, right? But it gives you an idea of what you're going for. So I have the goggles and I have the head and I have the character. Maybe I need to explore these a little bit more. These ears. All right. Cool. So I think that you get the idea roughly of what I'm trying to create here. It's more about just trusting the process. You see what I had at the beginning compared to this is a big step up, even though it's still very, very rough. but it is getting there. And then you can start like looking at your character and judging things a bit better and go like, you know what, this line here, and I'm gonna bring in my Epic pen as well. One second. Is there any questions so far, or everything's all good?
Luke had a question about breaking up your subtools. Said if you're approaching the scope as if you were creating a character for the use in a game engine, would you use different subtools or just keep everything fused?
No, absolutely. You would use multiple subtools, but this is what one of the main things I would like to emphasize, that this process is not to create a polished character just yet. This process is to create an idea and create an appealing concept. Once you have that concept, then you have to worry, or you can start worrying about how to turn that into something that will work in a game engine, or make it more, polish it and do the hard surface, the topology, all of that, right? So the answer is yes. If you want to polish it, use multiple subtools. We'll get to that. Don't worry. So maybe I'll just wait. I'll just save that question for when I'm explaining this. All right. So I'm going to take this as an example. And I look at these lines, and it feels a little bit blobby, or it feels a bit off. Maybe this is a better color. Like this line right here. This one also feels like it's too sharp, right? So I'm trying to be judgmental, but not judgmental. Maybe like criticize my work in a way that would help me improve it, right? I kind of like this section, but I have these two lines that I feel they clash a little bit, because one is a little bit rounded, like the visuals that I see, and the other one is like a bit sharper. So I can either make this, sharper like that, or I can make this a little bit softer. So hopefully this kind of like makes sense, but this is what I wanted to show you. So once I get to this point, I'll start using the move brush to refine this idea a bit more, and try to make sure that all the stuff, all the volumes that I have, they kind of like make sense. And you see, it's just tiny notches. I'm not changing things completely. It's just tiny notches to ensure the volumes work together, right? So everything can be read as a whole. So that's one of the main things. I would say just focus on looking at your character from different angles. Maybe the cheekbones are a little bit too low as well, and that helps to sort of create a more of a triangular shape. All right, and I'm gonna make the neck a little bit thinner as well. So these are just like tiny notches, nothing too crazy. Let's say that you want to change the shoulder pads. Again, part of the design process. You go like, this is cool, but it needs to be a bit more protective. So this is only kind of like protecting the joint here in the shoulder, like the acromion process. But we want something that covers the deltoid. So you could do two things. Again, it's all about the speed in this case, which is turn on the Sculptris Pro. Smooth all of this, right? We could also go with a mask brush and mask something like this. Oops, hang on, sorry. So it's a little bit bigger. Invert that mask and then use the Sculptris Pro with the snake hook brush, or even the move brush is probably easy in this case, to move this out a little bit like that. Smooth everything. Maybe keep pushing it. And that's it. You can smooth this out. And again, it becomes a game of redefining, not polishing, but redefining the idea that you want. So do the same thing, go with this one. All right, and I'm gonna use the damp standard brush as well to cut in here. And maybe let's do some additional stronger folds in there. And this would be, I would say, the first pass towards getting your character out of the way, as in getting started with your character. But you could also add a bunch of other stuff. I'm gonna refine the general proportions quickly, and then I'll bring in the final one that I have. But I want to show you a couple more things about this process. Right? So this doesn't take too long. And let's say I'm happy with this. I just want to add a few more things. So for example, the some tubes, right? So I can just use the tube brush. And this tube brush, let's turn on Sculptris Pro. Obviously, this allows you to do these tubes, but I want them to follow a specific area or a specific contour of the volume. So right now, if I do this, it's going to be done based on the plane that you first clicked on. So this point, if you look at it from the side, from the side here, it's based on that normal, and it's all in one single plane. So what we need to do is go to Picker, go to Depth, and click on Continuously, and that continuously evaluate the surface as you draw it. So for example, this is how I made the tubes in my character. So I'll do something like this, and it goes around, and it just, I don't know, goes into here, and then right click to reduce my brush size, something like that, accept that, and then maybe something that comes from the head, like that, and then it comes, I don't know, it joins this area here. Right. So you can connect this a little bit easier if you just do it without changing the picker. But for me, it would be just a matter of clicking on, well, actually we have polygroups in this case. So we can hold Control and Shift to isolate this. We can mask this bit, bring back everything, and unmask. So this is just a quick way. This is pretty basic, but in case you're not familiar with this process, all I've done here is I use the selection tools. Let me actually do it slowly because, yeah, if you're new to this type of stuff, it could be a bit daunting. So we have polygroups, meaning that these new pieces all have different IDs, different colors, so that that allows us to isolate them really easy. So if you click on the select rectangular that you can access by holding Control and Shift, so you see it here. So these are all your selection tools. Control, Shift, access this. I can hold Control and Shift to access just this bit or to isolate it. Then I can use my masking tool, something like that. Just mask this area. And then Control Shift to access the selection and basically bring back everything. So let's turn off the polyframe. So I have this little piece masked out. So I want to invert the mask, Control and click once in the canvas. And then I can bring in the gizmo center to the unmasked areas. And I'm just going to try to connect it with this one. Again, it doesn't have continuity, but it doesn't matter. All I want to do is have something in there, right? And then I can just go with my Sculptris Pro stuff and then add some information or add some more details here. Right? It's as simple as that. I don't know if this is something that I want to work with, but you know, it's there. This is not the original design, so I actually don't like that. See, this is the point of like designing, that you're doing something to test if it works, and you're not spending too much time creating like these amazing things with perfect topology, because you might lose that sort of appeal very easily if you just concentrate too much on the technicalities of it. Anyway, this is pretty much it. All right. So once you get to this point, you can really quickly iterate and produce variations of this. So this is the next step. So don't worry. Again, I want to be very, very clear about this. Don't worry about turning this into a perfect topology and a perfect thing for video games. I mean, that could be the aim. But right now, and the aim for this workshop is to create something that is kind of like an appealing character, so that you go through this process of iteration, right? So once you have this, let's go ahead and do a quick polypaint, because that also helps you set the mood with palettes, and it kind of like gives you a hint of the mood as well, of the genre or the theme that you're working for, or trying to recreate here. So I'm going to leave this material. Let's go with this material, and I'm going to use the soft polypaint. I'm going to turn off this Sculptris Pro. So in this next step, I'm just going to define the colors that I want to work with. So let's select some kind of like leather material, fill that object. That's it. And I'm going to variate that leather, maybe make it a bit, you know, desaturated and darker. And I'll use the Sharpie one. So that desaturated one will be maybe for this. Again, this is just a sketch. I'm not worrying about going over certain areas or drawing exactly within the lines. You know, if you have a bit of an OCD, this might be a hard thing to wrap your head around, but you know, this is the important part. Let's go ahead and do like a softer, lighter tone maybe here. And I'm just gonna hide these because I know there are different colors, different IDs or polygroups. I can hide them easily, right? For this thing, I'm gonna make it like a gray tone, maybe like a lighter bluish tone for the tech. This will be too blue. And I can actually make these tubes the same color very quickly. For the top bit or like the goggles, I'm gonna go for black or dark gray. And then here at the top, maybe this is kind of like an amber, bright amber for the what could be the glass, or not the glass, the visor type of thing, something like that. I'm gonna also go for a very dark purplish tone, maybe more like a blue tone, just for this, which is going to be either the rubber or like the protection bit, like so. So yeah, that's not too bad. Now for the head, what I can do is mask out just the area that I want. So I'm going to use the mask lasso to mask this. And I just need to refine the mask. So I'm just using Control and click outside to invert the mask. So let's mask this like so. All right, so very quick way of creating that mask, and then I can use the same tool that I've been using. And I'm gonna start with a dark green color for the guy. So it's already kind of like a Yoda, you know, vibes, which is fine. And this is what is important to go through this process, because sometimes you have these preconceived ideas of what you think is cool, but it's sometimes just because you're remembering a character or something that it's memorable or it's very appealing to you. So, you know, this is what is important. So I'm just gonna go maybe with darker tones towards the ears and at the back. And I like to treat my characters as compositions. So usually you see this type of technique throughout my work if you look at it. Because again, it's a simple but effective way of drawing focus to specific areas. I'll show you in a second what I mean. Just making things a bit softer here. We just kind of like just a more natural transition. Maybe let's darken this up. All right, so let me see if this makes sense. So I like to treat my characters as compositions themselves, so not the presentation itself, right? So if the character is my composition, how can I, within the character volumes, within the character palette, how can I draw attention to the areas that I want the audience to look at first, or to spend most of the time looking, right? In this case, it has a big head, this character, big eyes, so it's kind of like creating, I want to create that emotional empathy, because it's a creature, an alien creature, but I want to infuse that idea, this design, with human traits, really. And that's what makes it a bit more relatable in some cases. So that is just to say that I want the audience to sort of like look at the face of the character first, right? So I use techniques like this color palette to focus on the face. And that basically means that all these areas, right? So all of this is kind of like a gradient from this point. Let's say these points right here that are dark to these points in here that are lighter, right? So it starts in the center and it kind of like radiates out as a gradient in terms of the color palette. So if I don't tell you these things, you might not, pick it up or just go like, yeah, it looks cool, but but if you know why, or if you know that the intentionality behind it, and then you have those conscious decision, then you can manipulate how your audience looks or sees your character. So I think this is a really valuable thing to keep in mind when you're playing around with this stuff. I'm going to switch quickly to the Sharpie, clear the mask, and I'm just going to use one of these colors. And I'll define this very quickly. So it could be another leather bead. All right, how are we doing with time? Okay, cool. So we just hit the 2-hour mark. We're not too bad. We're not too far away from what I want to show you. This is kind of like the bulk of the process. The rest becomes very repetitive, but it's a simpler thing to polish. All right, so let's say that we have this and we like it. Maybe I'll do a quick thing here just to set up maybe some dials or something. Yeah, and then I'll just make this. This is the screen. All right, there we go. So what I'll do at this point is I will save this file, and this is just my first iteration, my first test of the design. And usually the first one might give you a really good starting point, but it might not be the best, right? It's just that I kind of like already went through this process and I liked the one that I'm doing. So I'm kind of like trying to replicate that. But in an ideal scenario, when you're creating something from scratch, the first idea you come up with is usually going to be a repurposed idea of what you had in your head, and it's just a collection of memories that you've been gathering through your day or through your week, and just looks kind of like very cliche. But if you do this process multiple times, you come up with something that is very unique.